Hello. This is a video that I'm making in response to a question from Mike Digi at dpreview.com. Mike recently saw an album at Flickr in which I'd posted a number of invertebrate images, flies, spiders and so on. I'd processed them in my normal software, which at the moment is DxO, Optics Pro and SilkyPix, but Mike has recently started using Helicon Filter and wondered what it would be like to process this sort of image in Helicon Filter. So I've chosen 6 of the images from that album and I'll have a go at processing them in Helicon Filter. Before I start, I want to look at one of the settings in Helicon Filter which has turned out to be rather important. The problem arose with the first image that I looked at, which was this one of a spider. Now it looks okay, except that I know that there are hairs on the abdomen in this white area here. So the natural thing to do would be to pull the highlights down. But if I do that, as I pull them down, that area doesn't smoothly become less bright. It remains white. If I put the highlights back up and try taking the brightness down, I get a similar effect. Now the problem is that I know that this area isn't blown because I've processed this image before with different software. And if I turn on the exposure warnings, then we can see that Helicon Filter thinks that this area is overexposed. And if I turn the highlights down, it stays overexposed. If I turn the exposure right down, it's actually saying that it isn't overexposed now, but it is. Well, it's obviously all too dark to use, and as soon as I approach getting it at all lighter, then it's gone completely white again. This meant that I couldn't make any progress with this image, in the sense that I did want this to look, I couldn't get this to look how I wanted it to. It turns out that this has to do with the way Helicon Filter is reading in the raw file to begin with. If we look up here at Settings and Preferences, there's a tab here, Raw, and here we can see Method, and it says Embedded Raw Converter. Now the reason that I've got it set to this is because it has this very promising looking thing here about highlights. Now highlights matter a lot to me for my close-up images because of the way I capture them. I often have to deal with difficult highlights. And this rebuild looks as if it's saying, well, if it's blown, we'll do what we can to mend it, as some other software does. However, having this setting like this is causing me the problem that we've just seen. So what I've done is then to change this method to Adobe Raw DNG converter. Now I don't have these options down here, but I'll save that. And if I reload this image, it's now reading the raw file in, and one of the things about using this DNG converter is that it is slower than using the embedded converter. But now it's read it in, And if I alter the brightness, I'll take the brightness up a bit, and then bring the highlights down, it's going down smoothly. Now it does look very flat, but we'll come on to that in a minute as to how to cure that. But I don't have this problem with that area just steadfastly remaining completely white. And so I'm going to be using Helicon Filter with the settings, preferences, raw, set to Adobe Raw DNG converter. So let's go to the first example. It's now reading the raw file in using DNG converter. And there it is. It's actually not looking too bad. I'd prefer it perhaps if this area was not quite as dark. So I might want to raise the shadows a little, not much. Just a little. The problem is, I'll do it a lot now, that as I raise the shadows, and I've done it more than I'd really want to at this point, it gets a very strange, flat, misty, HDR-y type look to it. This can happen when you pull down highlights as well. One of the sliders that turns out to be really important when you're dealing with the brightness tab here is this one called zone size. Now I've pulled up the shadows a very long way here, and I'm going to pull this zone size over to the right, and that change, and I'm now wiggling it backwards and forwards, and it makes a lot of difference to the look of the image. And so that flatness has gone now. Now that's perhaps more than I might want to raise the shadows, but I think I'll leave them like they are. The other thing, two other things I'd like to do with this. One is sharpening this image. Now down here I can alter the size of what I'm looking at by using this slider, and there are some buttons there you can use as well. And I'll go to the sharpening tab and I'll say sharpen edges, and that's sharpened them up a bit. The other thing that I'd like to do is to get rid of this area here. This is a reflection of the flash diffuser and it looks quite ugly. And so I'm going to try and clone this out. So I'm going to go up here to Retouching, and there's a drop down here that lets me choose what I want to do by way of retouching, and I'll choose Clone. There are two options for the way this works, depending on how you have this move source area set up. One way, and I can't remember which is which, and by the way I'm altering the size of what's going to happen by just rolling the mouse wheel here, and that's changing the brush size, which you can also use the slider for as well. I'll make this a bit bigger so that we can see what's going on, and I can also change the size of what we're looking at. I can pull this slider backwards and forwards, so that's quite crude. When the hand is over that and I click on the round thing on the slider, if I roll the mouse wheel, then each click takes it a bit bigger and smaller, which is a much finer way of altering the magnification. So there are two ways of using this. In the first one I've just clicked, and that's defined where it is that I want the change to take place, and I'm now moving the mouse around, and that's determining what is going to be put in the place where the cloning is going to take place. I'm going to press the right mouse button now, which takes me back, And the other way of doing this is that you click and that determines what you're going to copy, and you move the mouse around and that determines where it's going to copy it. I can change a couple of things here. One is I can change the hardness of the brush, and that's how much feathering there is around the edge of the brush. So I've turned the hardness down. If I turn it right down, there's a lot of feathering. If you turn it right up, there's none. And the other thing is you can change the intensity, which if I turn it right down, well, it's having no effect at all. And now it's halfway up, and so it's having a faint effect. I tend to use cloning with the intensity right up. There is another option here, which is that you can clone just the texture rather than the intensity as well. I think that's the way it works. I've never used that. So I will now turn it back to the way that I prefer using it, which is that I click somewhere to define where I want the action to take place. I've done that, and as I move the mouse cursor and click, it puts down something in that place. I've now right clicked to get my so that I can move this again, and I'll click again. That's where the next bit is going to go, and click down, right click, left click. Not got that one positioned quite right. I'll move it a bit further over here. Still got a bit of a straight line along it, and I got that wrong. Try again. Now down here I'd like to pick up perhaps something from there, so there, almost. And finally this last little bit here, which I'll pick up from there. That'll do. So if we now zoom out, whoops, if I take it in the right direction, we zoom out, and that area is looking a bit better than it was. So that's the first example. The next example is the spider that I had so much problem with. It's asking whether I want to save what I've done, and I will save it because I'm going to post these images up on Flickr. So I will decide where I want to put them, which I've done, and I will save it as a JPEG. It's been saved. It's now loading the spider, so we have to wait while that loads up. Incidentally, this is quite a powerful PC, so on less powerful PCs things would be slower, and it's not just the loading of these files that's slow. Sometimes when you're doing operations, or when I'm doing operations, I find it rather slow. I have to wait for something to happen, which can be a bit confusing at times actually. So here we have this spider. Now what I want to do is I'll go back to the brightness tab. It's all looking rather dark. I'll make it a bit brighter, but I'd really like the background to be less dark, so I'm going to raise the shadows, pull them right up. Now we've got this effect that it's gone very flat again, so I'll go to the zone size and pull this across, and that's made it look better. And now I'll try bringing the highlights down just a little, so that the abdomen is more consistent in terms of its brightness with the rest of the spider. Now I'm also going to crop this image, So I'll go to the cropping tab and I'll pull the corners in. Now this image, and I'll tick that to say that that's okay. This image was captured with an FZ200, a Panasonic FZ200, which is a very noisy camera with a very small sensor. What I've done is two things that are going to make noise a problem. One is that I've raised the shadows a lot, which means that here in the shadow areas that have been raised I've got noise, and I've made the situation worse by cropping the image. I'll try and get rid of this noise, so I'll go to the noise tab and I'm going to turn the noise reduction right up. This is here, the amount of the noise reduction, and I'm going to turn it right up. It's still looking rather sort of spotty down there. There are two methods you can use. One is standard, one is aggressive. So I'll use the aggressive one, and that still hasn't cured the problem, I don't think. And there's a noise level one, not quite sure what that does. I really ought to look at the help, I suppose. But I'll turn that right up, and I think that's gone a bit smoother now. I'm now going to have a look at 100%, and if we look down here at the slider, it's got a little triangle on it. If I click on the triangle, it takes us straight to 100%. Now, if I move this up, it's not too bad. We're looking at 100%, and at less than 100%, that might be acceptable. The trouble is that it's made a real mess of the rest of the image. The detail has just not quite disappeared, but it's really done a lot of damage to it. So that isn't really very satisfactory. So what I'm going to do is, over on the left here we've got the history of what's been done, and I'm going to click on the noise reduction and then say delete. So that noise reduction is no longer there. The detail has come back. If we look now at 100%, much more, we can see the hairs better here, but the noise is back. So I'm going to take a different approach with the noise now. I'm going to try and select the areas where I want to apply noise reduction and just apply noise reduction there. So I'm going to go to the Retouching tab, and in the drop down list I'm going to choose Make Selection, and there are two methods you can use: select similar colours and separate two colours, and I find that generally the more effective. So I'll click on Separate Two Colours, and you'll see two boxes here. So I'll click on the first one, and this is what's called the positive colour. This is the colour which we, when I choose it, that will be selected. So I'll click here somewhere on the green, or whatever colour you'd call that. And now I'll click on the other box, and I'll click on this whitish sort of area, greyish. If I now make this bigger, which I can do with the slider, it's at the moment not, it's going to choose both what's on the spider and what's on the background. That's because the tolerance is set to 100%. If I turn this tolerance down, we can see that it's now going to choose mainly outside the spider. If I turn it down again, turn it down, oh, that was smoothing, not tolerance. Not sure exactly what smoothing does. Now it's doing better at choosing the background rather than the spider. In fact, I think I'll turn it up a little. See, I'm having difficulty getting it to do either one or the other. It's mixing it up a bit. I'm now going to just click the mouse button as I go round, and it's choosing some of the wrong areas, but that's a start. Now I'm going to fill in these areas. I'm going to turn the tolerance back up to 100%, so that wherever I click it will choose. I'll turn the hardness, I'll turn the brush size down, so I'm using a smaller brush, and I can fill in the areas that I want to apply noise reduction to. You don't necessarily have to be 100% accurate when you're doing this noise reduction thing. You're just trying to get rid of the obvious areas. And I might want to be a bit more accurate about it around here. It's a matter of choice as to how accurate you want to be, and how big you're going to make the image subsequently, how big it's going to be viewed, because some of these things aren't going to be visible if you don't look at a very big version of the image. And I actually want to, there's a little aphid down here, and I really don't want to apply noise reduction to that. So under selection mode, I'm going to say erase selection, and then just here, if I can find it, where the aphid is, I'm going to get rid of the noise reduction. Where's the aphid? Ah, there it is. So I can then, if I want, put some of this back. Again, it's a matter of how important the image is to you as to how much time you want to spend fiddling with this sort of thing. The other thing is that I might want to go back to turning this off, so I can delete the bits actually that it's chosen wrongly on the spider, and I might do the same with the legs as well. Although these are areas of the legs that are actually going out of focus, so I probably do want noise reduction on them. But you can alter which bits you apply it to and which bits you don't. So I've now made the selection. And if I go to noise, down at the bottom we can see this drop down menu, and at the moment it's saying apply to the whole image, so I'm going to apply this to the selected area, and I'm going to turn everything right up, the noise reduction, the noise level, make it aggressive. Now it's, if we have a closer look, it's done the quite strong noise reduction here, but we've still got all the detail here in the spider. Next I'm going to sharpen the spider, but I want to sharpen just the spider. I don't want to sharpen this because that will bring the noise back up again. So I'm going to go to the sharpening tab, and down here I'm going to say apply to not selected. So now it's going to sharpen just the spider, and I'll turn the sharpening on. So I've now sharpened the spider, and I've applied noise reduction to the background. And that's as much as I want to do with that image, so I'll save that one. Image contains transparency information which cannot be saved in current format. Cancel operation, save as PNG or TIFF to preserve transparency. I'll save it anyway. I don't care about the transparency, whatever that is. File has been successfully saved. So we can now go on to the next example. We wait while it reads it in. Now this one, it's a bit light, but in fact I'm going to do something strange to this one. And first thing, I'll crop it. I'll go to the cropping tab, and because it's all rather at the top, so I'll crop it, and in fact I'll maybe pull this the other way round so that it's now portrait orientation. I'd like a bit more above there, but I haven't got it, so that's about as best I can do. So I'll click on the apply change. Now I'm going to do something odd here. It is quite bright looking, but in fact I'm going to turn the highlights up. It was a bright day. Well, when I did that last night, that looked better, but I'm not convinced about that. No, actually, yeah, I think I will leave it up. Wonder what happens if I change the zone size at this point. Nothing. Okay, that's probably because I haven't applied much by way of highlights. Then I'll sharpen it. So if I go to the sharpening tab, turn it up a bit so I can see what's happening with the sharpening. By the way, moving the image around, so I want to move it like this. I'm holding the space bar down on the keyboard, and that's causing the cursor to change to this crossed arrows, and when it's like that, with the mouse button down, I can move the image around. And if I let go of the spacebar, I get my normal pointer back. So I'll apply some sharpening to this. That's okay, but it is applying, the more I sharpen, the more the backgrounds get noisier, and I can see a bit of noise in that background, which I'd like to get rid of. Now I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to go to the Noise tab, but this time I'm going to, I will turn the noise reduction up. Let's have a look closer so that we can see. So I'll turn the noise reduction up, which I think has reduced the noise. I've turned it up in the highlights as well because this is a brighter area, and I think that's better than it was. But as always, when you apply noise reduction, you lose detail. So what I'm going to do is to try and apply this noise reduction just to the green areas of this image. And I'm going to start by just running the mouse along here to bring all these dots down. And this is determining where the effect is taking place. And we can see that the noise has come back and some of the sharpness has come back as well, I think. Now, if I point at this area here, you can see a white line moving over on this coloured spectrum here. As I move, there's the white line. So if I click, that's put a black line down, and so I can see which bit that I need to deal with. And I'm going to turn the noise reduction on just in those colours. So now the noise reduction is applying to the green area, but not to the other areas. So I've sharpened it and dealt with some of the noise that came up as a result. And that's as much as I want to do with that image. So I'll save that one. The next example is a blue bottlefly. The shadows are rather dark. I think I may turn the brightness up a little. I'll go to the brightness tab and use the brightness slider to turn the brightness up a bit. And the main thing here is I'd like the shadows, I'd like to bring this up a bit. So I'll use the shadows slider to bring that up. And again, it's got that slightly flat look, not as bad as it was previously, but I'll alter the zone size to firm it up a bit. I wonder what happens if I take the highlights down. Yes, the colour, I'm looking at this area here. The colour has come back to it when I turn the highlights down. I might want to turn the overall brightness up again. There's a bit of a battle here as can I make it as bright as I want while still retaining the colours here. I'll turn the highlights down some more, and there's a limit to what I can achieve with that. But there is still some colour in most of that. There's a white area there that I can't get rid of. But that's not too bad. I will sharpen it now. So if I go to the sharpening tab, I'll make it a bit bigger so that we can see what's going on. I'll go to the sharpening tab and sharpen edges. That's put some sharpness into it. And I may have caused some noise in the background. It doesn't look too bad, but I will go to the noise tab. This filter is already applied. Would you like to edit the parameters of the existing filter or add a new one? Well, that's very strange. Let me cancel that and do this again. Noise. Oh, noise reduction. I've already got noise reduction set. I don't quite know why that is. So I'm clicking over here on the left in the history on, let's do that again, on the noise reduction. And I'm going to delete that one and start again with the noise reduction. And I will go to the noise tab, and that automatically provides some default noise reduction, and I think that will do. That's fine. Having done that, I might want to go back to the sharpness and edit the existing filter for sharpness and perhaps turn it up a bit, because noise reduction does reduce the sharpness. And again, there's a battle between noise and sharpness, and you always have to try and find some sort of suitable balance between the two of them. So that's the image as it looks now. I'll save that one. The next example is a bubble blowing fly. Again, we'll wait while it's loaded. And Adobe DNG converter is doing its job. I want to crop this one. I'll go to the cropping tab, and I think I'll make this one, I certainly need to pull the bottom up, but I'll make this one, yes, I quite like the way that works. I'll do it that way around. Click on the tick to say that I've done that. Now I want it a bit brighter, and again I want the darker areas to be a bit brighter. So I'll go to brightness tab. I'll turn up the brightness, and perhaps I'll turn up the shadows. Perhaps I won't. And does it help to pull the highlights down? Not really. I think it takes the dynamism away. I think I'd like darker areas to be a bit darker. What I'll do is turn the brightness down, which will make the black areas a bit blacker, but I'll turn the highlights up. Yeah, that'll do. And I'm then going to sharpen it. Go to the sharpening tab, make it a bit bigger so I can see what's going on, and apply some sharpening. Oh, that was a bit too much perhaps. And that is possibly as much. Yes, that's as much as I want to do with that one. File, save as. That's saved that one. And finally, we have a wasp beetle. Now, what we've got here is there is some detail in this white area that I'd like to be able to see. I'll start by cropping, and I'll pull the corners in. In fact, I'll pull that in like so. You may wonder why I've chopped this edge off here. It might be better not to. It's to do with the proportions between the space at this side and the space at that side, and my preference is if this is further out, it makes this beetle too much in the middle of the image, so I'll live with cropping off that corner. Click on the tick. So I want to try and get the detail into here, which is pulling the highlights down. So I'll go to the brightness tab and pull the highlights down, and that's brought some detail in. However, it's made this very dark, so I'll try pulling the shadows up. Yes, it's done it, but it's made this, given this very strange look. So I'll go to zone size, and that's better. And I will have a look. It may be, let me look a bit more closely here. It may be that we've got some noise in the background. Well, we could do a similar trick as before if we wanted to. In fact, I think I may do that. In this case, I'm going to go to the Retouching tab, and in the drop down, one of the things that we can select is Reduce Noise. So what I'll do is to paint some noise reduction. I'll turn it right up, and I'll paint some noise reduction in here just to get rid of any noise that I've created by doing the sharpening. So that's an alternative to making a selection and then applying noise reduction within the selection. I'm going to do one other thing to this. In fact, I want to sharpen the beetle. So I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see what's going on. And I'm going to, with the retouching, I'm going to go to this drop down. Another thing that we can do is blur and sharpen. So there's a triangle in the middle. If you go to one side it sharpens, and if you go to the other side it blurs. So I'll turn the sharpening on, and I'll turn it right up for the moment, and as you move the cursor around you can see what the effect is. I'm not actually changing anything at the moment, but you can see what the effect is so that you can adjust what you're doing, run it over the image, and then when you've got it to a level that you think looks okay, you can then hold the mouse button down like I am now, and it applies what it is you've chosen. So I'm just doing the hairs and so on at this point, and not sharpening anything else. And that, do I want to sharpen that little bit there, just a little bit more? Perhaps I do. And that is possibly all I want to do to this image, except that I'm looking at this yellow and wondering, it looks a bit reduced in saturation. I wonder if I can paint saturation, change saturation. There we are. So what, oh look, it's making it a sort of an orangey colour. I'm not quite sure I like that. Can I change the brightness of it perhaps? What does that do? If I turn the brightness up there. That might, not quite that much perhaps. And you get the idea that you can fine-tune bits of these if you're so inclined, and alter the size so that you only do the bit that you're interested in. You've got to be very careful with this sort of thing. You can make images look very silly if you're not careful, and you leave boundaries between what you're changing and what you're not changing. But again, that's an illustration of what you can do. I'm not sure I like that. I might retouching, what's this? Brightness, change brightness. If I turn that off, yeah, you can see the effect. I think I've rather overdone it there. That's interesting. I think I've accidentally deleted the change in the brightness. Another approach to these yellows is to go to the Colours tab and try and turn up the saturation of the yellows. So if I point at, it's this colour in particular that I'm concerned to try and increase the saturation of. So I clicked on this, and the white line on the spectrum over here became a black line, which shows me where to operate. And if I turn the saturation up just in that area, there, that's now come brighter. The other thing is that it's got this strange orange colour to it, and I wonder if that's a white balance issue. I've got my cursor up here in this box, and I'm pulling the colours, moving the cursor around, and that's changing the colours. And to be honest, I'm making a right pig's breakfast of this. I don't think that's the answer to the problem. I'm going to go down here to the history, to where it says colours, and delete what I've done because it looked pretty horrible. I'm going to leave it like it is and call it a day with that one. So I'll save that one. And that completes the examples. So I'll post these at Flickr and do a little post at DP Review saying what I've done. So that's all for now. Goodbye.